first is Chris Baldwin, and he's the founder of True Digital Communications. He has a background in public relations and nearly 20 years of professional experience. With his expertise and experience, he is guiding companies on their own digital marketing journeys. At True, Chris is part strategist, part implementer, part teacher, and part networker. Is that 4 parts? Okay, just making
equals
sure.
100% somehow. So.
He's going to be joined by Tyler Norris. Tyler is a digital strategist at True Digital Communications. And Tyler says he is on a continuous mission to learn, understand, and master new developments in the industry. He has found success in social media strategy, SEO, SEM, and digital marketing analytics. In previous experiences at Goodyear and Kent State's communication department, Tyler has earned a wealth of experience in digital PR, social media, and content development. So please join me in welcoming Chris and Tyler.
We appreciate you coming out today. I know that it's now, 2 o'clock on a Friday, and it's supposed to be 70 degrees tomorrow, and you've had lunch. Out of curiosity, how many of you are students? Raise your hands. How many of you are professionals less than 5 years? Okay. You learned nothing else today. If you have the opportunity to speak at a conference like this, and they tell you you're going to follow up after Chief Oliver, just say no. So, anyways, what we're going to be talking about today, though, is really about consistency and really understanding how you take that channel, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, etc., but how we make sure that there's a consistency with tone, consistency with messaging, consistency with look and feel. I can't tell you how many times we've sat down with clients, and often they'll say, hey, we got this great event, and we get this wonderful social media program, and it's great, and it works, and we see the spike in it, and it goes really, really well. But what about the other 364 days out of that year when we're looking and we're putting up a picture of kitties playing, or hey, it's the first day of spring, let's show some ducklings, that kind of thing. Point of the matter is engagement should be consistent, it should be constant. And often if your clients haven't asked you this yet, they will, or if you are with your organization, how do you make sure every piece of engagement that you send out does just that, engages? It's, as we know, it's not all that easy. But one of the things that we've seen at True, working with our clients, and they run the gamut from not-for-profit to business to B2C, one of the messages that we've heard consistently is, how do we get consistency? How do we make sure that it looks like our message, our brand, our theme every time? And truthfully, a lot of times we are called in because the internal team, or whoever their partner was before, had no consistency. And the CEO stood up and said, this does not look like that, does not look like that. What the hell are we doing? That's where I think, honestly, we do some of our best work. And when I say some of our best work, it's people like Tyler Norris, who's going to lead a lot of our discussion today in terms of following a process and understanding how that process works. To that end, I also want to mention in the back of the room, we have Allison Ewing. Actually, Allison, you're not in the back of the room. Allison Ewing in the front of the room, Pam Long in the back of the room, and Brittany Williams in the back of the room as well. If you've got questions or you want to discuss this in any more, please ask them, pull them aside. I also want to give you a little incentive to ask their questions, again, knowing that we're following Chief Oliver. This is our wonderful True Approved t-shirt. They're only limited edition, so we only hand these out for really, 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 really good questions. But if you've got a really good question and make us stop, we're going to let Pam and Brittany and Allison know, hey, I think they just earned a t-shirt. So, anyways.
We've resorted to bribery.
Yeah, bribery. When you're going to follow the chief, you got to do something.
Great quality t-shirts.
Anyways, we'll get this started, but I think first and foremost, Tyler, I'm going to steal your message point. This is a dialogue. This isn't a presentation. Please ask questions, because I think you're going to get far more out of it. And truthfully, I play a game every time we do this. It's called How Do I Stump Tyler? I want you to try and stump Tyler, maybe 2 t-shirts if you do that, but ask away, okay? Sound like we're ready for this? Let's get going. Go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, to Chris's point, our goal here today is to just make it easier for you. When you go online, when you go to create a content calendar or post something on social media, we hear all the time we have no idea what to post, as Chris said. So our goal is to basically create avenues, create channels, create a strategy and thought process that makes that really easy for you to figure out. There we go. So we got to define consistency first, just so that you can't say we didn't tell you. You'll have the chance to leave after this if your definition of consistency isn't what ours is. So basically what we call it is a social media presence that adheres to brand standards while regularly providing adequate value and influencing users to continue to engage. That's as complicated as we could possibly make that. We tried really hard, couldn't make it any more complicated. But when you really look at that, you're talking about a social media presence, your brand standards, providing value, and fostering that engagement. Really, at the end of the day, we just don't want your social media channels to look like this. And I see heads shaking and smiles. Everybody's seen the clip art posts and the come to my website. I don't know why, but just come to my website. It's what you should do. We want to talk about when you go on social media at 4:30, what are you posting and why are you posting it? Have a good reason to do that.
I think one of the key points here as well, and one of my takeaways from Chief Oliver talking, is him saying, I've never once asked anybody to follow, to share, to do any of that. Again, it's the value he's providing. This is BS. This is never going to work.
And we'll also talk about ways that you can use maybe that spring is sprung post or something to maybe tie that back to your brand and things like that later too. But again, regular posts, highlight the brand, provide value, continue to engage. That's what we're talking about. I'll give you a second to leave if that's not what you were here for. But so consistency, why are we being consistent? There's a lot of good reasons to do it. There's some legwork up front that it takes to create these processes to be consistent, but there's a lot of good reasons to do so. Those are to save time, streamline your social media, and increase awareness. It's going to save time because, like I talked about, you're going to know what you're posting, you're going to know what your messages are, you're going to know what your brand's look and feel is, and then you're going to streamline social media because it's never easy to go through approval processes and get everybody on board with social media and your different strategy and your different message points. It would be easy. How many people post directly to their social channels here?
I think maybe a better question. How many community managers do we have in the room? Couple, okay.
So you know that it's never as easy as just you coming up with something or you having a post that you pulled from a content calendar and throwing it up there. The process usually looks a little bit more like this. There's a lot of people it's got to go through. A lot of people have to sign off on it. And inevitably, every one of these people has some sort of edit that they want.
Aunt Sally's actually my mom, but she clears everything we do for her. So.
And Aunt Sally, of course, reports back to the marketing manager. I don't know why, but they just. So if we have our social media streamlined to the point where we know what our messages are, we know what our look and feel is, you can go through these channels a lot faster. The marketing coordinator can look and say, oh, well, we always use this font, or oh, we have this sale going on this week, or this is one of our messages that we want to stick to. They won't go back to you and say, hey, maybe we should change it up or look at this a little differently. Everybody's on the same page that way.
It also produces, and just measurement is very, very important. You're going to hear us talk about that a lot here, but again, I think one of the key points that was mentioned today that I like to fall back on is something I tell the team as well. If the CEO, if the leader of that organization, your boss is in the room, can you justify every tweet, every Facebook post, everything that goes up? Now, obviously, if there's a great deal of money involved here, high production video you're putting up on YouTube, yeah, it better be consistent with your messaging. But again, do puppies, kitties, babies, etc. In a post, does that make sense? That's a conversation we had with one of our clients just here in the past week about a piece that they put up and said, is that truly engaging? No, it's not. And I think more importantly, the CEO was asking that question. Think about that.
The last point on there was increasing awareness. I watch a lot of movies, probably too many movies, but Men in Black is a good one. If you haven't seen it recently, go back to it. Agent K, full of wisdom, great stuff there. He's at one point in the movie, he's talking to Will Smith, and Will Smith wants to know why we can't just tell everybody in the world that they're constantly under threat of attack from aliens. And without skipping a beat, Agent K comes back and says, a person is very smart and very rational and can handle truth like that. But people, on the other hand, tend to act irrationally and make rash judgments. This is what we were talking about earlier today. The way Agent K actually said it was, a person is smart and people are stupid. Your audience isn't stupid, people aren't stupid, but the point is we have to cater to that lowest common attention span. And you're going to have people that scroll through and look at things really quickly. And if those messages and themes and your brand isn't really out in front, people aren't going to see it, and you're not going to continue to have those touch points and raise awareness. The way that we do this is through a checklist. We have a book club at work, and one of the most recent books we read was by a guy named, I'm going to mess this up, Atul Gawande. That's his name.
He's been practicing. I don't know if you saw him in the last session.
I literally had to look up a phonetic spelling, so that's. But anyway, the book was called the Checklist Manifesto, and what it's about is basically people with really hard jobs like pilots and doctors, surgeons specifically, who do very complex tasks, and it was basically looking at ways to take those complex tasks and make them simpler. With a checklist, go through this, this, and this, and this. And there's always a lot of resistance because people say, well, my job's really hard, and there's no way you can make a checklist to make it easier. That way anybody could do it. But the point is, the process can be really applied anywhere. We looked at how to apply it to some of the things that we do at True, and granted, we're not saving lives. We're basically just trying to increase awareness. But when it came to posting things on social media, what we wanted to do was create a checklist to make sure that we were consistent every time that we posted something on social media, whether it came from a content calendar or whether it was just, we got an email from a client at 4:30 and they said, this has to go up right now. We wanted to make sure that we had some sort of process in play so that we got the most out of that. The most awareness we could get, the most engagement we could get, and it comes down to these 4 things. Provide value, keep consistent messaging, stick to your tone, and then provide some sort of context.
Key point with this as well, and I think that we are all masters of our jobs. Again, not trying to be disrespectful for any of the intelligence or the great things that you might have learned here at Kent State. But I think one of the key points that came from this book is they said, when there is, God forbid, a situation in the airplane that you're on, those pilots don't just wing it. They literally pull out a checklist at that exact moment and they go through the checklist. That plane might be in a dive, but they're going through the checklist. They literally take it to that level. So fast forward to, and I think we've all been in that situation, client calls or your CEO calls or your boss and says, hey, this is going on right now. I think we need to put this up on Facebook. Do we? Hey, do we? But secondly, are we going to follow the process? Does it make sense? Okay? Again, part of the idea of what we're talking about is what should go up, but if there's something that should go up, clearly there's something that shouldn't go up. And you've got to be able to say stop, no, don't.
Absolutely, and we're going to go on and talk about each one of these in a little bit more detail now. With the first one being value, kind of the easiest one, make sure that everything you do on social media provides some sort of value. Oftentimes the first thing we hear when we say this is, well, I can't have a sale every week or I can't give away free stuff every week. Well, you don't have to. Value can mean a lot of things. It can be tips, jokes, it can be affirming quotes, always work out really well. It's just a matter of knowing your audience and knowing all of the different ways that you can provide value. And that goes back to your strategy, which you figure out in previous steps here. But
Can you go back this way? Go back one. Real quick. Nope, go back. Who does it look like? Imagine him in a mirror looking and trying to create the perfect image. Sorry.
I haven't got the cow lick. It's
Yeah. Brittany, you just get that joke? Good.
But that's the point there, is it's anything that will make you say thanks. That was a good point to bring that up. If you would say to somebody in person, well, would it require a thanks back? And that can be, again, those quotes and jokes and things like that. An example that we have from an organization that we work with is Barrett Fencing. They actually have an internally focused social media effort. They have employees all over the country in different plants and sales offices and things like that, and they basically want to increase morale and coordinate between them. We went through and we were creating calendars for them, and we went back and found this thing called the Barrett Way that they made, and it was 10 ways that you can be more Barrett. They hadn't used it in years, so we went back and dusted it off and just created a couple simple images that fit with their brand, similar fonts and colors that they use elsewhere, adhering to those standards. But employees loved it. They jumped on this. They were really happy to hear that, basically the organization was standing behind them and knew that they were working hard.
I want to throw a key point with this as well, and as we're starting to look for content, again, you've got those big events, you've got a lot of things to talk about, but what about those slow days? This literally, right after their mission statement, was their core values. This is one of their core values. And again, I thought this was fascinating when they said, we've got plants in 7 different states, 2 different countries. We've got over, I want to say, how many employees? I suddenly forgot. We got a lot of employees, more than one. Point being, though, is when you've got such a varied base of employees, how do you get everybody on the same page? And this is one of the reasons they said Facebook really works for this. But again, taking off this, as Tyler pointed out, dusted set of mission and values and starting to bring it back to life. The other key point here, how many of you do some work with graphic design? Or at least let me say, you feel enough to be dangerous. Join hands. Okay, I see some head nodding me. I'm dangerous. Okay, good. Point of the matter is this. We see this a lot of times with our clients where, you'll take whatever you saw from XYZ organization, you'll grab it, you'll throw it up, you'll repurpose it, you go with it in that way. Does it look like your brand? Does it have your brand colors? Does it have your brand fonts? one of the things that we've done consistently with clients is making sure that this looks like their stuff, and it should be, because we don't know if it's going to be retweeted, repurposed, et cetera. We'll have some really good examples of this later on, but I think that's one of the things that was a glaring flash, the obvious, and one of the things that our clients have come back to us and said, before, inconsistent, look wasn't the same, we're all over the place. Then suddenly, boom, we have a template, we have a look. Nothing's gonna go out without this font, without this look. Boom, suddenly everything looks uniform, consistent.
Yeah. And as long as we're trying to talk about how to provide value, it's also important to make sure that you're providing value. It goes back to analytics. I'm not Chief Oliver. I really like analytics and use them a lot. But my heart broke a little because I really look up to the chief. It's, whatever, it's fine. How many people use Google Analytics at all? How many people are terrified by Google Analytics? Oh, that's true. That's true.
That's Google.
Yeah.
It's not going to change. Embrace your analytical side. Even if analytics make you cry, you guys understand. Oh, damn, he's talking about math. Embrace it and go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's just campaign URLs. Anybody familiar with those before I talk about them for a while? Yeah, heads nodding. Anyway, you can add basically short little codes to the end of your URLs to track what happens back in Google Analytics. And I wouldn't recommend doing this for every single social post or anything like that, but when you have a campaign going on, ongoing, so you know every single visit that comes back was tied to not only social media or just a free trial, maybe it was a free trial from Twitter and Facebook. You add those numbers up and you can really sort of start to see what success looks like and whether or not you actually provided that value that you think you're providing. Another way, YouTube, for example, a lot of people don't know that YouTube has their own analytics built in, and you can even find out how much of the video people watch, which is, you know, maybe the value proposition isn't even until halfway through your video. You'll know that people finished or, you know, click back after 30 seconds, which is obviously not what we want them to do. So on to messaging, this has a lot to do with that visual style that Chris was talking about, but also your brand messages, which again, those start earlier on in the process. But one thing that we like to think about whenever we're talking about posting on social media is, I would love to stand up here and tell you that I play chess and I'm good at it, but I learned how to play chess once. And, and the person that taught me, the first thing they said to me was, always move with intention, which I thought was brilliant, and it works in a lot of different facets of life, but especially social media. You know, I'm thinking back to somebody going online at 4:30 and saying, I gotta get something up. It's the first day of spring, let's just post this cute little picture of a chick. What does that do for your messaging? It doesn't really do anything for your brand. It may not hurt it at all, but there's an opportunity to continue your message there too. When it comes to different visual styles, obviously what Chris said, make sure you know what your brand looks like. I see so much Comic Sans on the internet and with different brands, and there's really not an excuse for it. I mean, even Microsoft Word, you can take a screenshot of something that you do in there. Microsoft Paint, I know people who are wizards in Paint, which I don't even understand. They do things I didn't even know it could do. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Key point with this as well, generally speaking, again, show of hands, I want to get you guys active this Friday, et cetera. How many people, either with your organization or your clients, is there a brand standards guide that says content, look, feel? Are you using it with social media? See a couple of heads yes, I see a couple of heads no. You should be. It's going to make life so much easier for you, and that's why we can get rid of, personally I have a passion to get rid of Comic Sans. I think it's like one of the worst fonts ever created. I think Tyler shares that, but let's talk a little bit about this.
There's a new Comic Sans out there.
And it doesn't look bad, actually. It looks pretty good. Talk about old Comic Sans. That's
There's a piece on Marketplace last night because there's a big fight over, I think, all of our favorite fonts that have come out and how much the fonts are worth. Two guys that created a lot of the most popular fonts out there are suing each other to the tune of $25 million right now over these fonts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Marketplace did this quick question, what's your favorite font? Well, of course, they're all over the place. They also asked the question, what's your least favorite font? Bam! Comic Sans, hands down, killed everybody. Everybody hates it. So I think we need to use it more. Maybe not. Go ahead.
Yeah, going back to things like that first day of spring post, and I'll actually talk more about fonts. That was a good segue. This is another brand we work with. It's called Blockloader. It's one of my favorite organizations that we work with because they're scrappy. They're small. They got small budgets. We do what we can for them, and they go up against bigger names like Carhartt, for example. So they got all the money in the world and do great things on social media. and we just try to keep up, I guess, in the best way we can. And a lot of what we do there comes back to being, topic on social media and adhering to our messaging and just really following these consistency examples, I guess. This would be an example, again, like I said, similar to spring, the polar vortex. Everybody remembers the polar vortex, right? If it was real, I don't even. Dick Goddard said it might not be real. I don't know. I'm just saying. But these are guys who, they're contractors. They're very aware when they're being marketed to. So we basically just find ways to connect with them. We find ways to act tough with them, and it leads. We, use those campaign tracking URLs. Watch how people come back to the website, and watch how people look at our jackets who maybe knew about the pants but didn't know about the jacket. So it really ties everything together for all of our different marketing efforts.
I have nothing to add. That was great.
A quick question there.
Yeah.
You talked about consistency of like look, feel, fonts, that sort of thing, but like the toughness factor, is there like a tone or like style consistency that you have?
Tone. Give him a T-shirt for that. That's.
You a larger. Chris, I'll give you that drink here in a little bit. What size shirt you wear? Large?
Medium.
Medium? Really? Sorry,
You owe him a couple drinks now.
Yeah,
That's
that's the difference between myself and my children, because kids this day, I got a 14 and a 12-year-old right now. Everything they like to wear is like 3 sizes too small, which I don't understand because I shouldn't wear an XL, but I wear an XL with everything. So really? Okay.
Well, you're not an XL.
I know, but I like wearing an XL. It's
I
comfortable.
actually
So.
used to wear larger clothes, but Lisa's only started making fun of me.
Truth be told. But we'll talk a little bit more, we'll talk a little bit more about tone, especially with Blackwater, because I want you to picture this, and you think about your customer, you think about your target audience, who you're trying to serve. What if you were allowed to insult them? That's what Blackwater lets us do.
Yeah.
Because these guys have attitude, and they love it when that brand produces attitude right back at them. So we'll talk about that here in a second. You had a question, go ahead.
I do have a question. I come from a trade association, so it might be a little different than some, but
I love trade associations, but we can talk about that later. Go ahead.
when it comes to posting it's spring, cute pictures of chicks and those sorts of things, I struggle with the difference between posting those what posts like that work best for us, or is Happy Halloween, is the whole staff in whatever little get up they wore to the office that day. Those work really well, but I think between saying it's happy, it's spring, and then putting your brand on it, I worry about then it becoming too promotional, too advertising, and then they just don't want to look at it because it's like trying to sell something. Is there a good way to differentiate, or?
There is a good way to differentiate, and I think it comes down to tone and messaging, but ultimately, what is the goal you're trying to serve? Is it simply with that association? I think one of the key things that you look at is, can we put a face on the organization? So specifically with Facebook, Facebook is great for personality, hands down, great for personality, show the organization. So identifying and sharing those people, letting them share their Halloween look, that kind of thing. Now that type of a message with just that versus a salesy message that then redirects or confuses your audience, I think you need to look at what's being said there. But I think without a doubt, that what you just described is far more impactful than showing a picture of a jack-o'-lantern that was clip art, etc. So smart move in that regard. But am I answering your question though? I feel like I am, but I'm not. So go ahead.
Well, I'm always leery of crossing the line of making it too branded and then it's scaring people away. Like I feel like we're constantly shoving advertisements down people's throats, and we want to be engaging without being too promotional.
Question for you. When you say we are always shoving advertising messaging down their throats, your association customers?
Well, yes, it's always,
Okay.
we're sending out too many emails, we're hitting them too much in too many places, and then it's like,
So I would tell you that there is value in not having any sales message, making it very simple and very direct in that manner. But I think to your point, you do have to be cautious, because I think the point that Chief Oliver just made about, Americans are really smart about knowing when they're being marketed to. He's absolutely right about that. We all know that. So I think in terms of, are you better to not say anything at all or have that sales message? No, I think there's value in coming back and saying, look, we need to put a name and a face to the organization, and we do need to remind them we are here to help you, and that doesn't always necessarily mean we're here to sell to you. And so I would tell you, and this is something where every one of you has great power. Be that voice, be that person internally that says, hey, we need to mix this up. Maybe we are selling a little too hard. Maybe we need to be more honest or more authentic, or maybe the word is more approachable and connecting. So being able to say this looks, smells, and feels like advertising, and should we do this? Got to be able to ask that question. Great question. Great question.
That's a good point. These guys are very aware that they're being advertised to, and I mean, even something like this may cross a line for some of them, but at the same time, we're talking about the cold weather. Nowhere in the message did it say go buy a jacket or anything like that. It's the difference between sharing information and a sales pitch, essentially.
We'll talk about it here in a little bit, but I think one of the best things you can possibly do, and Lisa, I'm curious if you would agree with this, I look at success in this way: when you can market your clients' products and services and never show their products and services. To me, that's success. And when you get really good engagement on top of it all, we've done that with Blockbuster, but we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Go ahead.
So yeah, on a tone, like Chris brought us to, some of the different ways that you can identify what tones are going to resonate with your audience and then stick to those are things like traditional tactics like developing user personas, segmenting your audience, knowing that we have basically investors versus consumers versus media that follow our social channels. How do we talk to them differently when we're crafting a post for one? Does it look like the post for the other? And then another one would be finally analyzing those words and phrases that you use. A lot of social media, I mean, it comes down to the words that you post, the images or multimedia or videos that you post with it, that's kind of what you have. One way that we sort of identify that is with Excel. So some people like analytics. Anybody like Excel too, or any Excel fans? My intern's back there raising her hand. She loves Excel.
Real quick, as I see people like shaking their heads saying, oh dear God, not Excel. I would tell you that the practitioner of the future, when I say the future is really now. Take an Excel class, learn it, because ultimately what it's going to give you, I'm a frustrated PR person. My background is PR. This is what I've done. And as a PR person, whenever I got a placement, my big thought was, my God, is anybody actually reading this? Are they seeing this other than my mother? And what analytics gives you is it substantiates and says this is working, or it isn't working, or this worked but that didn't, so where do I go from that? If you can read an Excel spreadsheet and understand the data and this wonderful little formula that I got to tell you is gold that Tyler's about to share with you, you just brought yourself up value-wise within the organization tremendously, because you can offer insights like what he's about to share with you. So as I say that, don't run scared into the forest when you hear Excel, because it really is a wonderful tool.
Yeah, average if specifically is something that we use to figure out basically among a certain subset of information, if a certain character string is used, what does that mean? How many instances of that phrase was used? An example is, let's say you have all of your tweets in column A and your reach in column B. You can take a key phrase or specific word or topic from your, that you would use in any of your tweets, and then figure out the average reach for all of those tweets using that keyword or phrase. Specific example is with one company we work with. We use the phrase "checkout" a lot, and we have a suspicion that it wasn't really as engaging as it could be. So it would be like, oh, check out this video, or check out this, or check out that. And we were able to see really quickly, just by using the average if function, that we had lower engagement when we used that phrase. So we started restructuring those sentences to say things in different, more engaging ways. What they are, I can't really tell you because I don't remember right now, but they were more engaging ways.
Point of the matter, though, is that you really can get to that level. So if you've got that client, or even that client CEO that says, I think we need to do Throwback Thursday, and we need to show shots from our past. And you're thinking, oh dear God, this doesn't connect with the brand. It's not messaging properly. Using tools like this to come back and say, does it work, or not? You can prove it. You can go from there. Go ahead.
Are you able to overcome when you've had a less than stellar previous campaign that you've had out there and able to rebrand yourself? Do you say just go cold turkey for a little while and start fresh, or do you say just try to start slowly rebranding yourself to get a different tone, get a different message out there to be more consistent?
That's a great question. Client that actually we've shown some work for already today that will remain nameless. We walked into that same situation where literally they came in and said, look, we've been doing this on our own. just not resonating, and we're basically getting, people's moms liking things, and that's not our target audience. That's not where we want to go. So where do we go with this? What do we do? Well, one of the things we really sat down with them was engaging them to figure out first and foremost, what are the goals? Where do we want to take this? Ultimately, what's the sales goal? What's the strategy? Where does this go? Man, it sounds familiar from your presentation earlier today. So we started there, and then the question came, do we turn this off immediately? Do we turn it on? What do we do? We lucked out. The woman who had been working there, had been doing all these things, got fired. Who knew? And that was on a Friday.
Social media mistake.
What's that?
Or a really stupid social media mistake.
She left on Friday, and so it became very quick. Hey, guess what? You guys are doing it on Monday. We switched it cold turkey. What was amazing for us, though, and not to say that what they weren't doing before wasn't successful, it was in some regards, their level was this. We switched it cold turkey, and it was amazing. Immediately, the engagement went up. And again, we stayed true to the brand, we stayed true to the messaging. So I would tell you, I guess part of me would say, be careful how you step, maybe a slow transition, but honestly, the few times that we walked in a situation like this, and we have changed it like overnight, we saw almost an immediate return. So.
At what point do you have to be, okay, we clearly need to turn around what we're doing because it's failing. At what, is there like a mark at which okay, 50% needs to be much higher, or it's 20%, it's not going to work, we need to change? Is that what we're doing now?
It's all very relative. I mean, you can, whether you're talking about reach or engagement, or whether it's traffic back to your site, whatever your goal is, I mean, it really comes back to, is it doing what you want to do? And if it's not, I mean, if you're not increasing awareness by this much, and if you're not bringing this many users back to your site, then yeah, it's time to look at what you're doing and figure out where the chain is broken, which link is broken in that chain.
How do you stop people from having goals that are too lofty and unreachable then?
It's a good question.
Two things to this. I think to your point, first and foremost, when you know what your performance goals are, whether they be the out there communications goals versus the sales goals, we need to sell X or we need to get this level of engagement. If you're missing, you're missing. And so you need to sit down and say, time out, we need to relook at the strategy and figure out what is working and what isn't. To your point, what about the lofty goals? I would tell you first and foremost two things. One, look at your history. What have we done? Has consistent growth been, let's say, 2-3% per month in terms of our engagement, or what do our sales look like? See what's honestly been happening, and now you've at least got a benchmark for your organization. And admittedly, if I'm the CEO in the room, I'm going to say, well, that sucks, we should be doing 2 times that. Okay, that sucks, but it's reality right now. So let's go ahead and use this as our starting point and go from there. Second thing, I believe there's a lot of value in benchmarking against your competition. What are they doing? What type of level is out there? There's fantastic tools to get a real good sense of exactly what's working and why for them, and you can probably, without too much guesswork, get a good sense of exactly where they're at. So, okay, if we're here, and maybe they're with us, okay, great opportunity for us to grow leaps and bounds, or maybe they're up here, and guess what? We're not going to do that in a year, but maybe in 2 years, maybe in 3 years, we can. It's that type of basically framing up the universe and understanding what's possible and why, and then bringing that into the discussion so that you can get the C-suite on the same page and say, look, here's how we're going to grow, and here's where we're going to go with this. We had a situation with a client, and they came back and said, look, we should be here. We know that. We think we're very capable of this. We did a great we did a great paid search program for them all over the country, et cetera. And what we found very quickly is, yeah, they want to be here, and they're right. They should be there when you look at their traffic and how things were going. But what we found with their sales process, their salespeople were not ready for internet leads. Not at all. And what that came really quickly was a very honest discussion with the CEO. Said, look, you want to be here, we can get the traffic up here, but guess what? We have a big hurdle to overcome here. Your sales staff is not ready to take an internet lead because essentially these are price shoppers and your guys don't know how to talk price. So my point in saying that is that's when you can get into a far more engaging discussion about what communications is capable of, what sales is capable of, and where there's a difference in between and how you're going to overcome that. That make sense? Great question. It actually happens a lot. In terms of somebody told somebody, well, you should be up here, and so suddenly the bar is up here, and the communication team looks at each other and says, what the hell do we do now? So.
Yeah, just more example of tone, going back to Block Letter a little bit. This is where Chris was talking about we get to be mean to him. And this is an example of how a type of post for us sort of started, where it was like, we're just kind of mean, not that mean, just being honest with them. And then it turns into something like this, which actually ends up getting better engagement than the other post. This was also during the polar vortex, actually. So, and then going back to those fonts and things like that we were talking about, we actually saw at one point, we tried some other fonts here. This isn't really, they're not very strict about their brand. They give us a lot of leeway to do whatever we want to do. And we tried different fonts, and we would see lower engagement, and then we go back to this Stratum Bold, if you're interested, and saw that we would get better reach, better engagement with those types of posts. And that, to the best we can tell, has a lot to do with the fact that the people who continually like to engage with the brand, they know what to look for. As they're scrolling through their newsfeed really quickly and not necessarily paying attention, this sticks out to them.
Incidentally, there's absolutely no pictures of their product in this, and yet we have fantastic engagement. And I know Tyler will never speak of this, but in Europe, Blackladder is the brand. It's actually Sweden. I'm not even saying it right. It's what, Youtoo or something? I screwed up. I'm not Swedish. But my point in saying this is they are the big dominant brand. Like so many other cases that came over to the United States, expected to kick butt and take names. And guess what? We're not Europe. And Carhartt's been here for 100 years, and Carhartt has much deeper pockets than we have. But I think that the true level of success for us is the fact that we took a program that was way behind, beating the Europeans in terms of engagement, where the brand has been around forever. But I think the true reflection of this is when Tyler found out the stuff that we're doing here in the United States, they're translating now and using in what, 10 different countries?
Yeah, we'll say 10. Nice round number.
They're translating it, they're reusing it in different languages, which I think is fun. So.
The last piece of the checklist would be that context. And this is an easy one that's really actually, we see it overlooked a lot. And that's basically just the fact that, you got a simple fact or a message point that you want to get out there, and it's making sure that anybody who goes through and looks through their tweets, looks through their newsfeed, understands what you're talking about. This is an organization, we'll leave it as an organization from my hometown, who is always a great example of bad social media. Anytime I'm looking for an example of bad social media, just go there. So obviously, as we know, anytime we post a link on Facebook, we get the title tag from that page on the link. They thought it would be great to just copy and paste that and use that as their message for the post, adding no value to the post. I don't know anything else about this park opening. I don't know where it is. I don't know why it's happening. I don't know if it's a new park or if they're relaunching this park. They could have added so much more information here to make it more valuable. Obviously, their followers got a lot of value out of it too. But so it's just thinking that you have, let's say, however many followers or likes that you have. All those people aren't constantly thinking about you. You as the community manager are constantly thinking about your brand. So if the way that we kind of usually think of it is if somebody just liked your page, if they just heard about your brand, will your post make sense to them? That person with very little of awareness, will they do what you want them to do based on that post? We call it the social sandwich. Each one of these different layers is a different post, and people scroll through and they go through them really quickly. Everybody wants to think that their post is the meat, but in reality, you're probably more like the tomato. So you got to do everything you can to be like the juiciest tomato that you can be.
Quote of the day, be the juiciest tomato. So.
If I'm going to be a tomato, I'm going to be a juicy tomato. And just another way to illustrate that would be, you have your link or your piece of content or whatever it is that you want to share. What else can you add to that? How can you make it more valuable in 140 characters? Is it the who, the what, the where, the when, or the why? And then last, just to finish it up, we're talking about consistency and being as consistent as possible. Don't be too consistent because you'll never learn anything that way, and you'll never figure out, maybe there's a new angle that we haven't approached before. Maybe there's a new strategy that we haven't thought about before. So don't be afraid to take risks once in a while. That's the great thing about social media is people do have short attention spans. So if you really mess up or post something terrible, you can usually bounce back as long as it's not, sex scandal or anything crazy like that. You'll probably be okay.
To that point, and I think this was one of the things that I heard actually, Amanda, from your presentation this morning. It used to be, yes, let's dabble our foot into the proverbial social media water and see what happens. You've got to have a plan. You've got to be able to connect it back to your goals, your strategy. Ultimately, those get defined. But then, what does success look like? How do we know that we're successful? Are we hitting our goals? To Tyler's point, though, you got to be looking and saying, what, we got to try some things new. We've got to test. I think one of the things that has been a lot of fun for us, actually, really, is looking at A/B testing. I mean, trying different ideas, trying things out to see what works. Because it will change, it will evolve, it will go different places.
Yeah. And then finally, we wrapped up a little bit early, and if you're still awake, we'll take some questions for you guys if you have those as well.
We wanted to keep this very basic because I think at the end of the day, any checklist is just that. It's basic. It should be, hey, are we doing these? Is it consistent? Is the content there? Is the tone there? We wanted to keep it there. Obviously, your situations are all very specific and different. So if there's specific ideas or questions, please ask away. I don't think Chief Oliver's left yet, so if you
He did, he left.
Oh. Yes, sir.
So, when you're thinking about different audiences for different channels, how do you want to maintain that consistency? But if you discover you do need to tailor some of those, we always try to do a lot of research and then do like 4 or 5 different things out of that, right? And you want to use that time wisely. So, how do you translate consistency across channels that are different?
You mean a different channel catered to a different audience, for example?
Like Twitter or Instagram. Like, how do you maintain consistency between social platforms if the formats are different?
Oh, right. Okay. Well, yeah. Some of the things that we look at when it comes down to 140 characters versus a long Facebook post or something like that would be those specific key phrases, that tone. It really goes back to that tone. As long as you're not writing Facebook posts for a lawyer, they don't necessarily have to. You can keep those pretty condensed. And the great thing is every channel allows for visuals. You can be as visual as you want to be. And that's something that we really try to push, just from obviously Instagram, but from Twitter to Facebook, posts with visuals just tend to get a lot more engagement. So if we can keep that visual style consistent across all channels, it tends to work out well. But the other side of that is, let's say you have an Instagram account specifically for consumers and you have a Twitter account specifically for investors, then you don't have to be consistent.
What about not overwhelming? Like, say you have consumer-facing numerous channels, but how do you decide which channels to post certain things so you're not giving somebody who follows 4 of your different platforms, for instance, the same content on all 4 platforms?
A lot of people disagree on this, and a lot of people say, well, you got to post different things across different channels because you have different audiences. But sometimes you don't have different audiences. Sometimes you have very similar audiences. And my thought is, if somebody follows my brand on all 4 channels, they must really love me. So they can see the same thing 4 times. That's okay.
My answer to that is why. I mean, and when I say that, what we're finding, who has the time to be involved and be actively following all the different social media channels that are out there? You really don't. But hey, just like Starbucks, I want to do it my way. I don't want to just get the black iced tea. I want this, this, and this in it. Same thing with social media. To Tyler's point, you might have that same message, and you've just got to look and say, okay, which channels? I'm going to send it out over all these different channels because I know you might be looking on Twitter, you might be looking on Facebook, you're on Instagram, and I have no idea, Lisa. What are you checking? But the point with that is that you have to be able to address that. I think one of the interesting things we're going through with the client right now is they would love to not do any print material, but the bulk of their customer base is baby boomers. And every time they take everything digital, they get hate mail from their customers saying, I can't read your stuff, and I'd rather get it in the mail. It's knowing that we've got that base, so we have to send some stuff to them digitally. Have to send it traditionally, but we're not going to ignore digital. We're going to go ahead and start to see what's resonating and why. But yeah, there's a reason we have multiple channels. I think, again, one of the key points I think today was knowing that you have a main social media hub, and then you've got all these micro hubs or micro channels. You need to make sure that you're using them all.
Another solution there that we've seen work is, you got multiple channels, and of course you want to push the same messages out across all of them. Even staggering, because if somebody follows you on all 4 channels, click-through rate on any given channel is going to be super low. So maybe somebody sees that post on Facebook, and then the next day or the next week they're scrolling through their Twitter feed and see it again. Maybe they click through that time, And it's obviously going to be different. It's not going to be character for character the same, but it's a way to just be in front of people as much as possible.
I kind of think of it as you see the same TV commercial more than one time,
Exactly.
right?
Absolutely.
But a lot of brands think once they post something on social, it's done. And there's nothing wrong with sharing that content multiple times.
Absolutely.
So I think that's also something to think about in terms of how you're sharing content. It's, social media is a different platform, but think about when you watch commercials, you see them over and over again.
Lisa, that's a great point, and actually got into a conversation we had with a client recently where they were saying, look, we're doing Facebook advertising. We've got a fantastic social media organic program that's on Facebook and Twitter. We're doing some print advertising. We're doing some direct mail. And they saw a huge spike in the program that we were working with, and they came back to us and said, well, what's working? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? What can we cut? And our answer to that was, yes, it's working. And what do you cut? Well, we can see some definitely high levels of what's working, in terms of social media or what's working here and there. But the point of the matter is, it's not one thing. It's all these different messages combined that is adding up. That's working. Now, I think all too often, a lot of times, especially in cost cutting, it's, well, can we get rid of this? Can we get rid of that? And to your point, asking and saying, look, does the TV ad work if you only see it once? Unless it says free, probably not. You got to look beyond that.
I think the key though is packaging it.
It is.
I hate when I see my peers being lazy, and I see the exact Facebook message and the exact thing that's put on Twitter and the exact thing on Instagram. Spend 5 minutes and write it a little bit differently, or package the message differently, or use it in a different way that's going to grab me. Because I might be following all your channels, but I stop looking at your stuff if it's exactly the same with the same intent.
To that point, again, if you learned nothing in college, be creative. Remember the importance of the headline, the importance of the visual. I mean, visual, that was the key message of last year's Youtoo conference. Be visual and create opportunities to share visuals. You're right, and I think this goes back to the days when those of us graduated many, many years ago from here, and we had the media reporter that took our press release verbatim and put it in there. And in one breath, it's like, well, that's success. No, it's not. They're being lazy. We can't be lazy either. You've got to, I kind of strikes against you when you see the exact same message in a Facebook post as you see in Twitter, as you see somewhere else. Have fun with it. I think one of the key points that Tyler has done here is saying, look, we try different headlines because we want to see what's working. Use that creativity to figure out what works, because it does count against you in my book. Tyler?
Yeah, and even from a tactical standpoint, I mean, they're different channels that function differently, especially if you're in like a Hootsuite scenario where you're posting across channels. Facebook attaches a link to a post. Twitter does not. So if you have those going across and you're just going to have this weird hyperlink in there that doesn't look right, you gotta, I mean, at least take the 30 seconds to copy and paste it correctly.
Good question. Good point, too. Other thoughts?
Chris, you're now late for your own wrap-up.
You are. You're like,
They pushed it back, actually, but thank you. Somebody else put it at
10 minutes.
5 after 3, 4 after 3.
In the earlier session, we heard a little about it being important to get your CEO or your directors to buy into the messaging and kind of lead the messaging on social media as far as what should be presented. Could you just give some tips if your CEO or director is a little reluctant or doesn't really fully understand social media, what might be the most relevant information to share with them to kind of try to drive that buy-in?
Get Aunt Sally on the phone.
That's interesting, because that's a question that we've now had come up several times in the last couple of months. And I wish I could tell you that there's one solution that's going to get them to realize it and understand it. But when you are dealing with a CEO or a leader who, A, is not comfortable using social media, doesn't like it, perhaps they're saying, look, we're only doing this because we have to, right there you've got a challenge. And until they get their peers or until they get those around them basically insisting, in the case of one of our clients, it was their board, and they looked at him and said, you will get on social media because it's the right thing to do. And he basically put up the surrender flag and said, okay, screw it, I'm going to have to get on there and learn it. But in that case, it was, well, should he be on Facebook? Actually, LinkedIn's a better communications tool for him. And so we started to look at it and say, where does this message work? Where can it work? And more importantly, how can he engage with his communications team to figure out where and how we can plug them in? And I think in a perfect scenario, you get a CEO or a leader who embraces it and understands it. And I would tell you that I think digital marketing communications, which I include social media, that is becoming a pillar. It's the pillar that links everything together. And eventually, we're going to get a C-suite that understands that and understands exactly how it all comes together. But I think in answer to your question, it's baby steps. It's getting comfortable slowly. Lisa, thought?
I would offer, because we work with a lot of clients in the C-suite, a lot of times what will get a CEO to pay attention is knowing that his competitors are doing it.
Excellent.
So when you do an audit of the competition and say, this is what's out there, our customers are clearly looking for information. They're not finding it from us, so they're finding it from them. That a lot of times will light the fire. Not necessarily the best way to do it, but that often is what will get a CEO to sort of start paying attention, to know that your competitors are ahead of you.
I would also say there's great value in doing some type of benchmarking again, and being able to show, here's where we're at, here's where they're at, and here's just general other brands that we pay attention to. But being able to show the role that that CEO is playing in helping further the goals of the organization through social media, a lot of times that really is the kick in the butt that they need. But I will tell you from personal experience, there's a whole lot of hand-holding. And once you get them past the thought that they're not going to break the internet or the Facebook, then you start to see, then they start to get it. And it's fascinating when they start to get it, like, oh wow, okay, yeah, I do see how this works. But baby steps.
In the process of them trying to get it, and the guy who waved the white flag, like, if he just said, screw it, I'll get on, and he just starts throwing stuff up because he's not listening to strategy and he's ignoring it, can't they do more damage than good in the interim?
Absolutely.
So do you really want them doing it?
No. What we do with them is we literally sit down and we script out. We do a content calendar. We script out with them the very next month.
Here's what you do until you get it.
Yeah, we tell them exactly, here's what you need to do, here's what you need to be thinking. Oh, by the way, because we already work with your communications people, we know what they're going to be focusing on, so we want you to steal their content and put your point of view on it, and then we want you to take your stuff and share it with them. So it's an engaging conversation like that. And that first month that you get into things, well, these 10 people liked this and shared it. Do I want that? Yeah, you probably should respond and say thanks. You get into social courtesies and go from there, but it starts the dialogue. But to your point, do you want them to just go out there and wing it? Hell no. It's going to produce some very awful discussions. But if you can direct them and share with them why they're doing it, why this is important, why it makes sense, we always take it back to goals, take it back to mission, take it back to where it should be, they start to get comfortable with it. Would you not say that the individual in question is far more comfortable with it today than he was 3 months ago, 4 months ago?
I would definitely agree. I'd also say that, when you're meeting with a CEO who maybe isn't that good at social or is really afraid, they're looking to you as, you are their counsel and you're kind of their brand cheerleader. That's how I think of myself. I'm the champion of their brand, so if I act excited about it, they inevitably get excited about it. And that's what I love to do,
That's a good point.
So.
The other side of it is if they do steal the keys and take social media out for a joyride, that's why we measure. We can go back and look and say, this is what we normally get in terms of engagement and reach, and this is what you did to us, so stop.
So we changed the password.
Go ahead. I think we got about a minute here. So.
Last year, our company decided to make sort of a split, and we're going to be emerging into more international markets.
Mm-hmm.
To be consistent, would you recommend being consistent going into the European and the Asian market from the U.S., or would you say put a marketing team in place in all those different markets to take your image and expand it, or?
Not knowing your company, your brand, your mission, who you compete with, it's hard for me to answer that, but my personal gut from my years of experience would say having feet on the street in those countries, in those places that understand the custom, the language, etc., is far more impactful than you trying to dictate it here from the U.S. That said, there should still be a mission, there should still be here's what we're trying to push, but my experience is you're best not to try and do that from here. So, great questions. We appreciate it very, very much. Thank you for sharing a little bit of time with us today. If you've got additional questions, you can always reach us here. Like I said, nobody stumped Tyler today, so no 2 t-shirts, but if somebody would like a t-shirt, we've got them in the back as well.
If you want a t-shirt, I got to pause the discussion, so.
We love a picture. we'd love a picture of you in that t-shirt that we can post on our Facebook page as well, so. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Think so? Good.